So the next topic to talk about then is who should enroll in the teacher training workshop, and who should the participants be, in other words, these volunteer teachers that we're going to train. And one of the important things to really clarify with the pastor is the purpose of the teacher training workshop. Because many times, even after you meet with a pastor of a church that's interested in doing literacy ministry, they don't quite understand exactly what our model is for working with churches. And sometimes they can assume that we're coming in to teach the classes, even though we say we're coming in to train your people to learn. For instance, one of the first teacher training workshops I did was in Peru. And when I got there were several older women that had walked over 7 or 8 miles through the Andes Mountains. This is in the Quechua speaking area of Peru. And they had walked through the mountains for several hours to get there, thinking that they were coming to their first literacy class and that I was going to teach them how to read. And so it's very important to really clarify over and over and make sure it's very well understood with the pastor and the other people promoting the workshop in the church that we are calling those who can read and who are willing to be volunteer teachers to come and get trained to teach the people who can't read in their church, which again seems pretty straightforward, but sometimes it can be confusing. So that's very important to clarify the purpose of the workshop. Do you guys want to add anything for the TTW enrollment? Who should attend?
Yes, ideally, the teachers that you're training should be able to read and write well, because as they're teaching lessons, they are reading Bible passages, and if they can't read fairly fluently, that's not quite as good. But there could be circumstances where it would be acceptable if they could at least read functionally.
Another thing is that sometimes you might have participants who are already teachers and they think they already know the method of teaching literacy. We want to emphasize this is the LEI method, and it's very important that we stick to that method. We do the 5 steps, and we want to reinforce that whenever we can.
Great, thanks. The next topic that we're going to talk about is the size of the enrollment of the teacher training workshops. How many volunteer teachers can we train well and train effectively? So what are your thoughts on that?
It is good, we have found it's good to have 2 people working with a particular class. It gives opportunities to, if someone forgets, if one of us forgets a certain part of what we're teaching, the other one can jump in and remind us of that. It's also better for the students because it's very important to check to make sure that they are going through all the 5 steps. And if you have 2 people in the class with 10 to 15 students, it just makes it easier for everybody and really better for the students.
Yeah, and that team training and team teaching aspect is really so crucial. And one of the things that we found when we were teaching ourselves is that sometimes we would be sick or we couldn't get out to the literacy class because we had to cross several rivers to get there in our dirt bike. And when it rained a lot, the rivers would rise and sometimes they were impassable. So to just have another team teacher that we could call and say, we're not going to be able to make it, you're on your own to run the class today. But they were already there and set up. We didn't have to call in a substitute teacher. And so that's also very important. The book recommends 12 to 15 people as far as a kind of a good maximum cap to put. And that is based on one trainer. And that's still a lot to manage, right? 12 to 15 people, because you have to walk around and make sure that everyone's teaching properly. And that's kind of what I would consider the max for myself personally. But when you have team trainers, then of course you can increase the size of your teacher training workshop. If you have 5 trainers, then you could train 15 times 5 participants. But there are some outliers within our ministry that are noteworthy, worth mentioning. There's a missionary serving in the Congo, the Democratic Republic of the Congo, and he will commonly train over 100 people, sometimes as much as 150 people. And his technique to do that is to go around initially after he teaches the 5 steps and see which of those 150 participants have really caught on to the method really well and can teach exactly how he's demonstrated. And then he appoints those people to be the team leaders for groups of 5 to 10 people. And then he's really just discipling those people and focusing on those people as they lead their teams. So again, that's not a very common model, but it is a model. And so if you're in a situation where you have a lot of people who need to be trained at one time, that is a technique that you can use. So the next topic that we're going to talk about is the refresher course. And what would you say for someone interested in doing a refresher course in an area where maybe they've started a ministry, they've done the teacher training workshop, and they've gone back and seen that maybe there are some deficiencies, some of the teachers aren't teaching exactly the method that you taught them? What would you do in that scenario?
Well, a refresher course, you could go over the method again and refresh their memories about that. It's also an opportunity for all the teachers that are gathered together to share some of the positive things that they've run into and some of the negatives, and to kind of brainstorm together. Both some of the other teachers can suggest solutions to the problems they're running into, and the trainers can also do that. You can ask if there's been any evidence of spiritual growth in their students, which would be an encouragement, because we want people to get to the point where they can read their Bible and know the Lord. It's an opportunity to share stories or testimonies. One of the ones that I can think of when we did a refresher course was there was a man in one of the classes who was in the church choir, but he couldn't read. So when they would learn a new song, they would kind of put him over to one side, which of course was very humiliating and discouraging to this gentleman. And as he participated in the reading class, he was eventually able to start reading the words in the new songs. And so they would include him, and that was just wonderful for him. It is also an opportunity to go over how to teach the Bible stories. When we did a refresher course, it had been some time since we did the initial training, and they probably didn't remember everything about the changes that come about when you teach the Bible stories. There are 2 steps that aren't in the lesson anymore, and so on. So that's also a good opportunity. And I think you had a testimony too, Bruce.
It's very fun to hear some of these testimonies. And one of them was about the age of students coming to the literacy classes. And this one lady was 71 years old, and she had 2 wishes. One, that she could someday write her name, and the second one, that she could read one psalm. Well, when they had finished both of the books, she was not only able to write her name and read one psalm, she could read all the psalms. And this brought tremendous joy for her.
Yeah, it's so encouraging to hear those stories, because again, literacy ministry is something that has its moments of discouragement where the students aren't progressing the way we want them to, or the teachers aren't teaching maybe the method as well as we'd want them to. So constantly sharing those encouraging stories of the transformation that's happening through the ministry is really fuel to keep going and keeps the volunteer teachers motivated. So that's really important.